Welcome to the Virtual Museum, your chance to step inside the world of Tudor Cheam.
Welcome to Whitehall Historic House. This house stands in the heart of the ancient village of Cheam. And the building that we're standing in today was built around the year 1500. This was 15 years into the reign of the first Tudor monarch, Henry VII. The boy that was going to go on to become Henry VIII was only 9 years old when this house was built. And today we're going to be looking at medicine in the Tudor times.
Today we're going to ask you the question, would you want to get ill in Tudor Cheam? At the moment you're probably thinking, hang on, I don't really fancy getting ill at all. I totally agree with you, but in this session we're going to be thinking specifically about whether it was a better or worse time and place to fall ill than today. We're going to find out where you would have gone for help if you were ill, what Tudors believed about the spread of disease, and what remedies they believed would cure diseases. The first question that we're going to ask is, where would you go for help if you were ill? Well, like lots of things in Tudor England, it depends how rich you were. If you were a member of the gentry, or even a rich citizen or a yeoman, you might be able to afford to see a doctor. If you weren't wealthy, but you could afford to pay for medicines, you might go to an apothecary. An apothecary prepared and supplied medicines. You could think of them as a forerunner to our modern pharmacist. He or she would serve an apprenticeship and belong to a guild. If you didn't have much money at all, there was often a wise woman in your village who might have been able to help you. She would have learned about the healing power of plants. Most people would have a section of their gardens where they would grow plants and herbs which had medicinal properties. This wise woman would make up medicines, and she'd be happy to have maybe a few eggs or a piece of meat or even some cloth as a payment. Finally, if you were very poor, you might have to rely on the expertise of those in your family. As I said before, most people kept a garden of herbs and plants, many of which had medicinal properties.
Now we know where you would have gone for help if you were ill in Tudor times and living in Tudor Cheam. Now we can think about what they believed caused disease in the first place. Now, you can have a think as you listen to this. Do you think they were right?
Tudors believed that disease was a punishment that was sent by God. If you'd lived a bad life, then you'd be punished with sickness. If you were to die from a disease, it was because you were a sinner. Those who lived good Christian lives would survive. People in Tudor England spotted that disease could be passed from person to person, but they believed that bad smells and foul air was what carried the sickness. Thirdly, they believed that being clean actually made you unhealthy. They thought that water could get into your body through the pores in your skin and make you unwell. This meant that they very rarely washed themselves with water. They would be more likely to rub themselves clean with linen fabric. Number 4. If you were ill, your 4 humours must have been out of balance. Nearly 2,000 years before the reign of the Tudor monarchs, an ancient Greek doctor called Hippocrates had devised a theory which he believed explained disease and sickness. It was the theory of the 4 humours. The theory of the 4 humours was based around what people believed to be the 4 elements of earth, air, fire, and water. They believed that the body was made up of 4 humours, or liquids I suppose you could say. The first of them was blood, the second, yellow bile, the third, black bile, and the fourth, phlegm. They believed that the way the 4 humours interacted was what caused changes in the body. They believed that blood was related to the element air, and that if there was too much blood in the body, you would become hot and moist. They believed that yellow bile was related to the element fire, and if there was too much yellow bile in the body, you would become hot and dry. They believed that black bile was related to the element earth, and that if there was too much black bile in your body, you would become cold and dry. They believed that phlegm was related to the element water, and that if there was too much phlegm in your body, you would become cold and moist. This theory was used as a way of diagnosing and treating diseases. If you had a fever and were hot and moist, it must be because you had too much blood in your body.
Does anybody know how they used to treat those that they thought had too much blood in their body? What did they used to do to treat that? Well, that's right. If the doctor thought that you had too much blood in your body, or bad blood in your body, they'd have to let it out. And the way that they would do that would be either to cut into your skin to let your blood out, or to attach leeches to your skin. Do you know what a leech is? A leech is a sort of parasitic worm that when it attaches itself to your body, it sucks your blood. Now, a doctor thought that this was actually helping you, but knowing what we know today, do you think this really would have made you more healthy or less healthy? Other ways that doctors might try to treat imbalances of these humours might be to heat you up if they thought that you were too cold, or to cool you down if they thought that you were too hot. Another way they might try to make you feel better would be to force you to be sick, to try and get out whatever it was inside you that was making you unwell. Now we know what people thought caused disease in the Tudor period, it's time to think about how they treated it. Let's start off by thinking what we do today. If you wake up with a headache one day, how do you treat it? What do your parents do to help you? Do they give you Calpol? Well, in Tudor England, there was no Calpol. If you woke up with a headache, the first place you would go would be the garden.
Hang on, why am I out here in the garden? Well, the garden was the first place that a Tudor apothecary or a wise woman would have come if they were looking for their remedies. Most Tudors would have had access to a herb garden with herbs a bit like this rosemary that I've got next to me, and they'd have used them for lots of different things in their daily life. They might have used them for flavouring their food, or they might have stuffed their mattresses with them to make them smell nice. Here I am at Whitehall's herb garden. Now, this is a modern example of a herb garden, but we do know that they would have had one here in the 1500s. In their traditional herb garden, they'd have grown things like thyme, rosemary, sage, and marjoram. They'd have also grown flowers like lavender and chamomile, and all of these things would have been used in their remedies. If you had a headache in Tudor England, you'd have taken some of the sage, some of the marjoram and some of the lavender, and you'd have mixed them together and put them in a tea. And if you drank that tea, it would help with your headache. Another important remedy in Tudor England was chamomile. So chamomile's like a small flower, and if you put that in some tea, it would help to cure a stomachache. That's not actually that unusual, because today you can still buy chamomile tea in shops and supermarkets, and people still use it to help with stomachaches.
While many of these herbal remedies were actually quite effective, because they didn't have a full understanding of what caused disease, some of them didn't work quite so well.
Here, at the top of the page, we've got a selection of health problems that were common in 16th century England. Underneath, we have the remedies that apothecaries would have prescribed to cure them. As you can see, on the top row, we have headaches, stomachaches, smallpox, jaundice, arthritis, a cough, pale skin, and something called gout. At the bottom, we have the remedies. I wonder if you can guess what they are. Well, let me tell you. The first one is the skin of a donkey. The next one is dill mixed with honey. The third one is iron filings in beer. The fourth is lice in ale. The fifth is chamomile tea. The sixth is a mixture of herbs. The seventh is hanging red curtains around the patient's bed. And the final one is a mixture made out of worms, pig's marrow, herbs, all boiled together with the hair of a red dog. Your job now is to match up the illness with the Tudor remedy. Well done, everybody. I wonder what you thought. Let's go through the answers together. So, the first one. What would a Tudor apothecary have recommended for a headache? Let's see. They'd have recommended mixing up a selection of herbs and drinking them in a tea. Next, let's look at the stomachache. Chamomile tea. Most people would have had chamomile growing in their gardens, so drinking chamomile tea would have been a very easy remedy. Next, smallpox. Tudors believed that hanging red curtains around the patient's bed would cure smallpox. Do you think they were right? Next, jaundice. They believed that if you mixed lice in beer, it would cure jaundice. If you had arthritis, you should take the skin of a donkey and wrap it around the affected area. That would make it all better. For a cough, you should take dill, which is a herb that would have grown in their gardens, and mix it with honey. If you had pale skin, you should take iron filings, put it in beer, and drink it. Do you think this was a healthy thing to do? And finally, for gout, they recommended taking the hair of a red dog, mixing it with worms, herbs, and the bone marrow from a pig, and taking that.
Hopefully you've gathered by now that Tudor Cheam was a pretty dangerous place to get ill. There were no anaesthetics, there were no antiseptics, and there were no real painkillers to speak of. Many remedies were just not effective because Tudors didn't have a good understanding of why disease was spread and how it was spread in the first place. There were very few ways of keeping yourself safe and healthy in Tudor Cheam. Now, to show you just how dangerous it was to be ill in Tudor Cheam, your teacher is going to call 10 children up to the front of the class. And we're going to pause the video while you do that.
Thank you very much to our lovely volunteers who are at the front of the room today. Now, one thing I need to explain to you. You're going to have to imagine that these 10 children were born in 1530 in Cheam. So once you've got that in your mind, we can get started. So the first thing your teacher's going to do is they're going to ask one child to step forwards. Now I'm afraid I have some bad news for this one child. In Tudor England, this one child out of 10 would not have made it to their first birthday. 1 in 10 infants died in their first year. Next, your teacher's going to choose 2 children to step forward. Now, it's slightly better news for you two. You are going to make it past the age of 1. In fact, these 2 children were likely to make it to the age of 15. Now, there were lots of things that could have caused someone under the age of 15 to die in the Tudor period. There were many diseases around, like smallpox and measles, and without a good understanding of how these were spread, it was a very dangerous time. Also, from the age of around 8, children would have typically been working in quite dangerous jobs, so that would have been an extra risk factor. Now it's time for your teacher to choose the next 5 children and ask them to stand forwards. You 5 are relatively lucky. If you were born in 1530 in Tudor Cheam, you would have made it to adulthood. However, it was very likely that you'd have died before you reached the age of 40. Now there are only 2 of you left. These are the only 2 of those original 10 babies born in 1530 who would have survived past the age of 40. Look at your teacher. How old is your teacher? How likely is it that your teacher would still be alive at this age if they'd been born in Tudor Cheam? Now it's time for you to show your teacher what you've learned today. The team over here at Sutton Heritage have got a project that we need your help with. In our archives, we've discovered a 500-year-old document which we believe was written by an important local apothecary called Master Culpepper from East Cheam House. Because the document is 500 years old, there are some sections of it that we can't read, and because you're such experts on Tudor medicine now, your job is to help us out by filling in the missing parts.
Your teacher is going to give you a sheet that looks a little bit like this, and you're going to use what you know about Tudor remedies to complete this page from an apothecary's notebook. I bet your teacher can't wait to see your work. Well done, everyone. Let's go back to the beginning of the lesson when we asked you, would you want to get ill in Tudor Cheam? We've learned what Tudors believed about how disease was spread, how they diagnosed diseases, and what remedies they believed would cure diseases. So, now we know a bit about what happened when someone fell ill in Tudor Cheam. What's your answer? Show your teacher whether the answer is a yes or no by giving them a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Thank you so much for joining us here at Whitehall Historic House today. We're open at weekends and on lots of school holidays as well, and we've always got fun activities going on. So when you go home today, do tell your parents and your guardians about us and get them to bring you along so you can see the house in person one day. Thank you. Bye.